So I went on this road trip with my dad, and on the road trip, we kept going to these stores, and I would go into these stores with my brother. We would play around and mess around with all the toys. Eventually, we got to the place where we needed to eat some food. So on this road trip, we went to my grandmother's house. And at my grandmother's house, we needed to then find somewhere to sleep. And everybody was finding their places to sleep at grandma's house. And there was a golden retriever dog. And I set it up so that this dog held up like a tent. Don't ask me why I used the dog to hold up the frame of the tent, but I did. Now, this dog would not cooperate at all. And so I had this frame of this tent set up so it was overlooking this cliff. And this dog was supposed to stay in just the right spot so that it would hold up the tent, but it kept moving and destroying the tent. And eventually, my mom said, back off, because the dog was getting super mad that I was trying to use it to make this tent work. So then I tried to make it without the dog. And eventually, we ended up underwater. I guess I took so long that this started taking on water somehow. And as we were taking on water, I thought, oh, I finally got this. And it was no longer making a tent, though. Now it was fishing. And I had this elaborate bait and tackle on the end of this line to catch a fish. So I was like, the water had gone down, the tide was low, and I was setting up all my bait and tackle. And then all of a sudden, the tide came back in and I lost all of it. And I thought, well, that's finally it. And I had sat there and struggled with this for so long. But finally, I just gave up. So then eventually, after the tide came back in, we realized that we were in like Disneyland. And we were at this place where Hercules was mixed with Pegasus, the horse. So it was like a talking horse that had the hair of Hercules off of the Disney Channel Hercules. And I was like, this is so weird that Hercules has always looked like this, isn't it? And Hercules had this race that was coming up, but there was all these rules. And the rule guide came and said, yes, Disneyland has been quite different since the new ownership, and we have to abide by all these rules. But if we lose this race, we'll never race again. And he was like, gonna race through all the other Disney kingdoms. So it wasn't necessarily just him racing through the ancient Greek world. It was this little tiny mixed being, a horse and a human, that was going to race through all the Disney kingdoms. And it was a baby. And this baby came up who was Hercules too. This baby came up to this guy who was like some weird Greek god announcer. And he was like, here's what you have to do. You have to make it there within 20 minutes. And for some reason, that was like very fast. So it was a 20-minute long race. So obviously not a sprint. But the race was going down all these slides. Okay. And he had to race this other person. And as they were racing, eventually they said go. Okay. And they were racing down these slides. And the other person that he was racing ended up breaking some spectator's glass, and it got him in tons of trouble. And it was like, oh yeah, finally we see the good guy, the hero of the story, Hercules. He's the champion, right? Because he didn't break like some spectator's glass that was like on the side of the track or something like that as they were like going past. And that was like the deciding factor of like, he was a good guy. Well, eventually I rode this track, and then it was like I was a bird that was flying up and down. And I was flying over mountains, but I only had so much power. It turned into like this video game where I was a bird that had to try to see how far I could get. And if you passed over a house, then you had more power, okay? And every time you were just over land, it started taking away power. So if you started off with a lot of power, then a lot of times you went over high mountains to get good points. But it was kind of risky because there was little chance that you would find a home to get more power from. So I was playing this game, and I was playing it with my friend. And my friend would play this in his class, all right? And we were sitting there and playing this game, and this guy came up and he pushed the chair over that I was sitting on from behind. And I was like, that was weird. And so my friend thought, well, that was weird too. And so I went and moved my chairs, and I just moved out of the chair and into a different chair. And then he came and he sat there and he was watching. And eventually this guy came and he was like, what are you doing here? And he was like, do you have the time to be here all day? And then my friend yelled out, he manages his money, so why are you bothering him? And come to find out, I was in my friend's class, and this guy was like, oh, well, you're going to get in trouble because you're not in this class. And so he was holding me there until like the cops came or something like that. And for some reason, I had just taken this class in college where the professor didn't care who was in there. It was a computer class, and everybody like played video games. And he just figured, you know what, like it's on your own time as if you like do the work or not. But out of that, like doing your work, he's like, you can basically do whatever you want. And there would be people that would show up that weren't necessarily in the class. And for some reason in this dream world, that was like the norm. And so eventually this guy was like, yeah, I'm going to call the cops. And I sat there and I broke free of this guy holding me. And I jumped over the chairs, and it was like theater seating. And I jumped over the back chairs, and there was like some people that let me pass. They're like, oh yeah, this is a joke. Like this guy's like taking this overboard. And so he was yelling at me as I was running away. And then I got through the door, and some girl grabbed my arms and tried to hold me there, and I broke free. And then as soon as I broke free of her arms, I woke up. That's my dream.